So first things first, the date of the count. It is next Tuesday night into Wednesday. That is the night that we are asking each person that we are surveying where they stayed the night on Tuesday. So most surveys will be administered Wednesday during the day, and we are allowed to collect surveys on Thursday and Friday as well. I'll get more into that in a little bit, but just as a reminder, it is next week, so it's right around the corner. And if you were attached to this meeting, I did send out the survey tool. If you need a printed survey or a set of printed surveys, please reach out to me as soon as possible. If you are participating in the unsheltered count with us or would like to, please also reach out to me. And I will make sure that everybody has supplies next week if you're needing printed surveys. And for the unsheltered count, we also have care bags that we'll be giving out. So for those who have not been a part of the point in time count before, the count means collecting the number of sheltered and unsheltered people experiencing homelessness throughout our Johnson County community. The count takes place across the country. It's always done in the last 10 days of January, and different communities kind of roll it out different ways. But the big picture perspective is that we're counting people that are experiencing homelessness in a shelter, a transitional housing program for homeless individuals, or people that are staying on the street, in a car, in a tent, places like that. We also collect demographic information, things about their housing history, medical history, and their past experiences to paint a broad picture of who is experiencing homelessness in Johnson County. The reason we do the count is to collect data one time a year. It is a snapshot, so it's about a 24-hour period, one time a year, and we've been doing the point in time count for over 10 years in Johnson County. If you ever want to look at this data, it is available on our website, or you can reach out to me directly. We put out a homeless fact sheet every year. It's data that is required by HUD, but we also collect some additional data locally to, again, look at who we're serving well and who we might be missing. It can inform policy and planning decisions at the local and state and federal levels. And that data that we submit to HUD is aggregate data, and it is required across the country. And it is part of the equation that determines what HUD dollars come back to our community. So we have this, one short period of time every year at the end of January to count as many people as possible. And that does affect, some of the dollars that come back for housing. So it's incredibly important that we have everybody on deck. And if you come across someone next week, it's important that we get a survey done. Keep in mind, HUD stressed the particular attention be given to data on veterans, chronically homeless households, unaccompanied children, and 18 to 24-year-old young adults. Point in time data looks at all different categories of homelessness, but these are populations they consider prioritized for housing services. Johnson County is also interested in how many of those experiencing homelessness in our community are employed, have been recently evicted, what percent were involved in the foster care system, and if a past criminal history is contributing to their current homelessness. And of course, as I mentioned, we use this data to determine the size and scope of homelessness at our local level, look at trends over time, what's changed from year to year. We have 10 plus years of this data, so we use it to inform who are we not serving, who do we need more services for, things of that nature. This is a snapshot of our point in time data over time for the past 10 years. The blue bars are those that were in emergency shelters. The red portion of the bar is transitional housing. And the little green box at the top is individuals that we counted who were unsheltered. Again, meaning that they were staying outdoors in a tent, things like that. You can see that it is a very small number of people each year, so it's critical that we find and engage each of those individuals. Last year, we counted 32 people in our county of over 600,000. So every survey matters. And this is a look at some of the data from the last 3 years. We put an asterisk on our 2021 data. 2020, because it was in January, was prior to the beginning of the shutdowns that started happening in 2020. But in 2021, last January, there were still several closures of services, places that people would normally go that they couldn't. So for the rest of time, we will look at 2021's data skeptically because a lot of the services just weren't there or were limited. There were caps on shelter beds that hadn't happened before. A lot of programs had to shift gears of how they did things. So it would no doubt have an effect on our numbers. You can see that quite a portion of our population that we count each year is children. So they might be staying in Salvation Army Family Lodge or Safe Home or another shelter like that. And you can see the one that we always kind of tune into is the employment line. In past years, it was 43% and 44%. And then last year it was 17%. I can't read into causality of that, but it just goes to show you that under normal circumstances, a big portion of our adults in the head of household or in adults by themselves do have some form of employment. This also gives some of the other barriers that people are facing as they're experiencing homelessness in our community. Any questions about the data portion of it? Okay. As I mentioned, the count takes place one night per year in the last 10 days of January. So we choose the day. We do it always on a Tuesday into a Wednesday. We ask questions about the length of homelessness to get at whether someone qualifies as chronically homeless. And then we report aggregate data to HUD. The data that we submit to HUD does not include personally identifying information. In fact, our survey only asks for initials and age. It does ask a lot of background information, but it does not ask for identifying information. The reason we ask for initials and age is to attempt to deduplicate. So we do need some amount of information to make sure the person hasn't done the survey twice accidentally, but we do not submit names or anything like that to HUD. Our point in time survey is done on a paper survey, and we're collecting sheltered and unsheltered information. I mentioned that because there is a count going on in Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, and other parts of the community. And each area has its own method of doing the count. I believe they're not even on the same day, might not even be the same week this year, I'm not sure. But I just want to mention that because many agencies do serve people in multiple counties, and the paper survey that I sent you is specific to Johnson County area. If you're working with someone else, we would want to make sure that person's counted, but not as part of our paper survey. So you need to get in contact with the continuum of care that is connected to that person. The unsheltered count where we are looking for people, people staying in vehicles, in parks, in abandoned buildings. If somebody was staying under a bridge, in a tent, anywhere like that, we will be driving around and looking for folks. And then we also go to places like Center of Grace that offer a meal. So if there are places where people might congregate, we would want to administer surveys there. So that's considered a service space count. And then these are the shelter locations where we administer the survey. This is old news by now, but I want to make sure to give the reminder to use all COVID precautions when administering a survey. Bring extra masks, hand sanitizer, wear a mask while you're administering the survey, and ask the person that you're surveying to wear one as well. If you are signing up to participate in the unsheltered count next week, I have KN95 masks for the group that's going out, so please reach out to me and I'll make sure that you have a handful of them to take with you. And then, of course, maintaining distance, being courteous, and explaining the purpose of the survey. If you are not participating in administering the survey, but would like to contribute, I would ask, spread the word, tell people that it's going on. The more people that know that the survey is happening, the more responsive people are to participating in the survey, whether that's the person that we're asking questions of or the person that might be able to conduct a survey. You might work in a setting where you don't necessarily come across people experiencing homelessness, but maybe next week you do. So you have a survey tool attached to the email that was sent prior to this meeting, and every survey counts towards our data. We are asking everyone to, once you get all those surveys done next week, if you would make sure to get them back to me by Wednesday, February 2nd. Again, that can be sending them to me. I can come get them, however we need to get them here, because then we'll have to turn them all into data and upload them after the count. But a few people have asked about volunteering this year. So we are using existing people that work for agencies that have a background in this work and are already working with the population, but we are not recruiting outside volunteers, and that's just to limit exposure risk and not have as many people involved in the count and focus on the people that are already working with individuals.
Rita, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
I know that you guys need help with the count. Can you talk a little bit about what time you guys are going out, what the help and what the commitment looks like?
Yes. So if you are able to help with the unsheltered count, what we are doing next Wednesday is we are going out early in the morning. The reason why is because if someone is staying in a camp type setting, they typically get up and go somewhere else during the day. So we are doing our kind of drive around canvassing primarily between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. Wednesday morning. We do have a need for some additional surveyors during the day on Wednesday. So we probably want to hit some spots more than once, making sure to kind of pass through areas. We have some listed, we have kind of a running list of areas that we may want to make sure to check next week because they are places that several of us have seen people that appear to be camping. So the big canvassing piece is Wednesday morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. But we can also use some folks to be sort of on-call surveyors between 9 and 5 on Wednesday next week. The on-call surveyors would be I did a presentation to all of the chiefs of police yesterday. And if they happen to come across somebody, they have my desk phone number, which will be forwarded to my cell phone number. So if they come across somebody, they said that they would reach out and one of us would go out and do a survey somewhere. If any kind of one-off situation like that. So a few service providers, again, don't anticipate seeing people, but if they might, I would love to have more hands on deck for the Wednesday during the day part, but definitely need some people to go out in the early morning. I'll get you guys some coffee. We're trying to hit up at least a handful of spots that we have an idea that there might be people camping in that area. And it's a good experience for, social workers that are newer at your agency, case managers. We are pairing up in groups of 2. So you can take separate cars, but going to the same area. And when you're getting out of your vehicle, having a second person with you, having the masks, and we have care bags that we'll give out that have hygiene items, hats, gloves, socks, hot hands, bottles of water, resource cards, things along those lines. So if you have an idea, and I would give this ask to the whole continuum of care, if you have an idea of a location that you feel like is most likely somewhere where somebody's staying in cars or in a camp, please do reach out. We have a little list going, but the hive mind and your eyes on the situation will really help make sure that we administer surveys everywhere that there are people. We also have lanyards for the street count. So there is it's a dark blue lanyard that says housing count on it. So that shows you as the person are not a police officer, but are a legitimate part of the continuum of care. Kind of gives a little backing to who you are and why you're asking questions. And I have approached people in previous counts plenty of times, just cold with no introduction. And I just always explain that it's important that we show the need for more housing services in Johnson County. So that's the way that I present it to them, but there is a little spiel at the very beginning of the survey that explains, and we'll go all through that. I'm going to show some examples of the survey here in a second. But yeah, if anybody would like to help with the unsheltered count, we definitely can use more hands for that early Wednesday morning next week. And then this mentions emergency contact lists for questions, definitions, etc. As I mentioned, my desk phone will be forwarded to my cell phone next week. So reach out to me. I'm happy to take your call. And just a reminder that we're asking about Tuesday, the 25th, regardless of when you administer the survey. When you are asking people to participate in this survey, keep in mind that they may be hesitant or resistant to talking, may be very talkative, may not look at you when they answer, and may ask for additional help and resources. We will have United Way 211 cards in the bags, as well as flyers for our coordinated entry system. And it's always a good idea to have some shelter phone numbers on you, just in case that the person's looking for something like that. The point in time survey is designed to be administered to the respondent by the surveyor. So in other words, you're holding the paper, asking the questions. Sometimes people want to take the survey from you and do it themselves. That's perfectly fine. If they are insistent on filling it out, they can. Just make sure when you get it back to flip through it and make sure that there's nothing missing. People are allowed to decline any questions, and it says that right at the beginning in the spiel that you give them, just reminding them that some of these questions are personal, and if you're uncomfortable with answering any, you will see a response that says don't know or refused throughout the survey. So if the person refuses a question, they are allowed to do so. We wanted to give a reminder, please, please, please fill out the very top of the survey with where you're surveying them and your name, the date, time. This is important because if there's any questions about the survey after the fact, when we're doing data entry, I can reach back out to you. We have to end up throwing away some surveys, you know, not throwing away, but leaving them out of the data because something is missing or incomplete. So there are times when if I can reach out to you, I can fix it and we can use the survey for our count. Here's the spiel. Hello, my name is Rita. I'm a volunteer with Johnson County Continuum of Care. We're conducting a survey to improve programs and services for local households without housing. Your participation is voluntary and confidential. And if there's any question you don't want to answer, we'll move on to the next one. Would you mind sharing 10 minutes of your time with me? And then we're asking, where did they stay on January 25th, Tuesday night? We don't read the categories to them, just asking them where they're staying and then picking the one that matches. These are the choices, and you'll see on the left, street, sidewalk, vehicle, park, abandoned building, and so on. Those are those street locations. If someone's staying in an emergency shelter, a transitional housing program, or a hotel or motel paid for by an agency. So if a church or a social service provider puts someone in a hotel because they are experiencing homelessness, that counts in terms of going on in the data. If the person pays for the hotel or motel themselves, or if a family member pays for it, then it does not count. So you'll see number 11 says hotel motel, and then number 13 says hotel motel self or other pay. That is the category where it does not go on in the survey. So if you get a response 12, 13, or 14, that is where you say, thank you so much for your time. If you get anything 1 through 11, you continue in the survey. There are broader definitions of homelessness than what we can use for the point in time count survey. So we understand folks that are in doubled up situations. If they are, a teenager staying at a friend's house because they were kicked out, that does count as homeless for McKinney-Vento. It does not count as homeless in terms of the point in time count survey. So we don't count people that are staying in a house or an apartment, staying in a hotel paid for by themselves or friends or family. We don't count people in permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing for the survey. We do count it for what's called the housing inventory count. Doubled up situations don't count. And youth that are staying in foster care type facilities don't count as part of the survey, as well as adults staying in mental health or chemical dependency situations. And then we're going to confirm that they were in Johnson County, because if they weren't, they need to be a part of a different count, which I think isn't even happening the same day. So we would end the survey there. You still want to fill out the top of the survey and give it back to me, even if you only get this far. And then this one's asking, basically, did you already do this survey with somebody? Because that would tell you you need to stop. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a DK/REF as an answer for all the survey questions. That means don't know or refused. So if the person declines, they say they don't want to answer a question, that's fine. You can put don't know, refused. And then we are asking, including yourself, how many adults, children were in your household who were sleeping in the same location with you that night. So a household can include people that are not related. If they consider themselves a household, they're a household. So it can be relatives, friends, any kind of connection that they consider themselves a combined household. The other people that you're asking about do need to have been there with them that night. So if they have a child staying with another parent or something like that, that child wouldn't count for the purpose of the point in time count survey. It's only who all was part of the household in that location that night. And then we ask for initials of each of the people, and you'll see that the survey is wide, and that is because it's built for an up to 5-person family. If you're just doing one person, you would just be filling out the first column. If you get a family that's larger than 5, you can fill out 2 surveys. You just want to make sure to write big and bold, 1 of 2, 2 of 2 on there, so that way I can spot that they are connected. When we are filling out demographic data, you want to complete the columns for persons 2 through 5, all other household members in order oldest to youngest, asking each of the people their demographic information. We should not be assuming that all members of a family are the same race or any kind of demographic kinds of things like that. If other members of the household aren't there, but we're staying with them, the person you're speaking to can answer. You just don't want to assume the answers to the question based on the head of household that you're talking to. And then it asks, how were each of the other people related to you? Child, spouse, other family, non-married partner, or other non-family. And then it asks just to confirm that person was staying with you last night. And then it asks for age, not date of birth. If the person's hesitant to answer on age, there are also age categories. We would prefer the actual age, but if the person's resistant, you can say, are they under 18, 18 to 24, or 25 and over? And there is also a don't know, refuse. And then gender, ethnicity, races, filling out all of those. You can choose more than one. If the person is more than one race, choose both boxes or multiple boxes, as many as you want. We'd prefer to not have multiracial. That's not useful for the data upload. And again, the reminder of don't assume that all household members are the same race or ethnicity. And then definition of gender non-conforming or non-binary. A person does not identify as exclusively male or female. Then it gets into questions about veteran status. And complete each of these for if there's 2 adults in the household, complete them for all adults in the household, the veteran questions. These next few questions get into length of homelessness and how many different episodes of homelessness, including homelessness caused by domestic violence.
Rita.
Yes.
Rita, sorry to interrupt, but there was a question.
Yeah.
Race and ethnicity that I thought I would get in here before we moved on.
Yeah.
So Kelly wants to know on race and ethnicity, what if they're a DACA student or international?
What if they're what?
if they are a DACA student or international. Kelly, can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. Some people don't really know what race ethnicity. I mean, they could, but or maybe I should ask this question. Is it important to know if they're an international or a DACA type student that's homeless? I'm just kind of throwing that out. So
we don't get we don't ask citizenship. It's not needed, so we don't ask about that, and usually that can make people get nervous about things, understandably. So we don't ask about citizenship. If the person identifies as Latinx and says nothing in terms of the race category, that's fine. You would just choose don't know, refused. There is conversation at the federal level of putting Hispanic with Latinx back into the race categories, but as of right now, it's still this way on half the forms that we fill out, and other forms that it's Hispanic Latinx is put on as a race category. So this is just how, of course, the government data is at this moment.
Oh, I completely understand. Not a problem.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was of interest to know if they're not from here. So
yeah, I mean, I am certainly interested in that. I think we have left that question off just because it does tend to make people feel like it might be turned in somewhere. Thanks for catching that, Teresa. And then the next few questions are asking questions that help us identify whether the person is chronically homeless, because you wouldn't want to ask it that way because that's government speak. Is this the first time you have been homeless? Are you currently experiencing homelessness because you are fleeing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking? How long have you been homeless this time? So a lot of times people aren't sure on, a date or anything like that. You can just kind of ask a few questions and help them come up with either a number of months, a number of days, a number of years. It doesn't have to be down to specifics, but putting a number in one of those rows. Including this time, how many separate times have you stayed in shelters or on the streets in the past 3 years since January 2019? Was it 4 or more times or less than 4 times? In total, how long did you stay in emergency shelters and on the streets those times? So this is getting at 4 or more incidents of homelessness and whether they add up to 365 days or not. These are new questions as of this year. We wanted to ask if people were impacted by the pandemic. Now, everybody was impacted in some way, most likely, but we're specifically asking, did the pandemic impact your ability to obtain or maintain housing? And did the pandemic impact your ability to obtain or maintain employment or income? Those are very broad, and it is just yes, no, don't know, refuse. So it's really up to the person's interpretation, because it can impact people in a lot of different ways, whether you lost a job or lost hours at a job, or less able to get forms of ID because offices were closed, childcare impacted employment, lots of different things happened these past 2 years. So we made the questions pretty broad to leave it to the person's interpretation. Questions 20 through 28 relate to sensitive data about household members, and we give the reminder that this information is kept confidential. Ask the adult head of household to self-report for 20 to 23, and also ask them to answer for every other household member. So in this case, you're asking the adult that you're speaking to. If there's kids in the household, you're asking the adult these questions rather than asking the child themselves. Do you or does the person drink alcohol, use illegal drugs, including prescription medications not prescribed to them, have any ongoing health problems or medical conditions such as diabetes, cancer, or heart disease? Do you have post-traumatic stress disorder? And it does give a definition if the person asks for it. Do you have a psychiatric or emotional condition, including depression, schizophrenia, something like that? Do you have a physical disability? Have you ever had a traumatic brain injury or an injury to your brain from a bump, blow, wound to the head? Do any of these situations we discussed keep you from holding a job or living in stable housing? If the person answers yes, then you would ask which ones. You can choose more than one under that. And this is kind of going back through that same list of risk factors that we just mentioned. Have you, has the other person ever received special education services for more than 6 months? Have you been diagnosed with HIV or an AIDS-related illness? Have you received any disability benefits such as Social Security income, Social Security disability income, or veterans disability benefits? Ask adult head of household to self-report for 24 to 28, and also answer only for the other adults in the household. So these next questions are just geared towards the adults in the household, and these instructions are on the survey tool itself. Are you a survivor of physical, emotional, and or sexual abuse? Were you or any adult in the household in the child welfare or foster care system as a child or a youth? So it's asking about past foster care experience. Has a past criminal history among any of your household members, including yourself, been a barrier to gaining or maintaining employment or housing? Has an eviction in the past 5 years among any of your household members, including yourself, been a barrier to gaining or maintaining employment and stable housing? Are you or any adult in your household currently employed? And if yes, approximately how many hours a week? And that is the end of the survey. It is 7 pages long. It's long because it has columns for up to 5 people. Doesn't take too much time to administer, except sometimes you can get somebody who's chatty and you do want to give them the time and an ear. We are asking about things like domestic violence, sexual assault and abuse, PTSD, because we want to collect data about the root causes of homelessness in our community. We ask these questions and want to make sure that we're trauma informed and be sensitive to their past experience and anything that they want to share and anything that they don't want to share. It's completely expected that sometimes people will not want to answer these questions or may shut down. That's okay. We don't want to push them. It's not necessary to take them into past experiences if it's upsetting, and we can skip those questions. We ask questions about the length of homelessness in a shelter or outdoors, on the street, in a tent, in a car, things like that, because we are getting at the definition of chronically homeless. So it is important to put details on those questions so that we can figure out whether the person qualifies as chronically homeless or not. Chronic homelessness definition also includes an ongoing disability. That's a big barrier to maintaining housing. So that's why we ask about the chronic health conditions and things along those lines. Any questions about the last few slides or anything so far? And as a reminder, people are allowed to say don't know, refused. And if you have more than 5 people, you can use a second survey form. Just make sure that, you know, it's very, very clear once I get it back that I can tell which 2 surveys are connected to each other. And to make sure to put your name and information at the very top of the form. Put an X for any letter of the person's initials that they don't provide. If you're in doubt about what someone's answer is, you can ask a clarifying question, but we don't need to go into a person's life story. A lot of those more sensitive questions are a yes, no. So we're not asking all the details of it. And then after the survey, all surveys must be submitted back to me by Wednesday, February 2nd. Please make sure to get them back to me so we can get the data upload going. That process is pretty labor intensive. We submit it to HUD, and then there is a further process of getting feedback back and fixing errors and things. So we would hope to have the data back to you all by April, but it just depends on how long it takes on the HUD side of things. Oh, I forgot to take Matt and Christina off of this. This is slides from that we updated from last year. Big thing for me. Oops. And let me fix this real quick because my direct line is 913-689-2323. The number listed is our office number. I'll make sure to send that out, and it is in the email that we sent out prior to this. My direct line, again, 913-689-2323. And that will be forwarded to my cell phone next week. So feel free to reach out. If it's not time sensitive, send me an email because I will be running around administering tons of surveys. And Teresa is also with us here at UCS and will be part of the count as well. So you'll see her out and about. Any questions about point in time count?
There are a couple questions in the chat. Rita, someone asked, how do you return the forms?
Because they don't have names and dates of birth, I am comfortable with receiving them scanned by email. That would be sent to my UCS email address. I am also happy to come get them. If you would like to drop them off here at UCS offices, we are in Corporate Woods. You can reach out to me and I can send you that address. Whatever everybody's most comfortable with. I just need the surveys back very quickly after the count. I'd prefer to really get them, you know, as the day that you get them, so that we don't have surveys floating around. So I'd really appreciate those get back to me really next week. You know, I'm going to be knocking on everybody's door if I'm missing any, but I would love to get those back as soon as possible after you administer them next week.
Couple other questions. Have you thought about collecting data electronically using SurveyMonkey? I realize paper is easier and not as intimidating, but as you said, labor intensive and increases errors.
Yeah, we are looking at some different tools. We just have to take into account, you know, both confidentiality and cost. There are some really amazing apps that I would love to find a funding source for next year. So, because I am literally going to take all these paper surveys and turn them into electronic, but have to take several things into account, and just didn't feel like we could pull it off this year in terms of the ones that are a paid app that's built for the point in time survey.
And then one other question, just to clarify, this does need to be in person and not over the phone.
There are some exceptions where surveys can be administered over the phone. I'd like those questions to come to me because it's depends on what the circumstances are. If it is a person that you have been working with and you know what their circumstances are, that is a circumstance where we can administer over the phone. So known street outreach clients, known case management clients, things like that. We are doing some phone administration, but we're not supposed to do a lot of like the phone type surveys are sort of an exception rather than the rule.
I think that is all the questions. Just a last reminder, if anybody hasn't entered their name and agency in the chat, can you please do that before we wrap up?
All right, and I am going to hand the mic over to Danny De Leon to talk about our coordinated entry system. Danny, I'll do the best I can on the slides here.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Danny De Leon with Catholic Charities, and just going to give a brief overview of our coordinated entry system. So when we are completing these surveys, we want to make sure that we are referring people and helping them connect with our coordinated entry system. So this is a philosophy that we have come to under HUD guidance and requirement. And we started really actively building our coordinated entry system here in Johnson County 5 or 6 years ago. And there are 4 components to a successful coordinated entry system. So number one, the goal is to increase equity and access for people who are experiencing homelessness and housing instability. So we want them to be able to connect to the system regardless of what agencies they're connected with or what they have or are aware of resource-wise. We also have to have an assessment process. We have to make sure that everyone who is coming into our coordinated entry system is receiving the same assessment or screening. Here in Johnson County, we use the VAT, the Vulnerability Assessment Tool. We have to have a prioritization system. And so this is our by name list. And so we do have policies and procedures within our coordinated entry. And once someone is completing a VAT, if they're experiencing literal homelessness, then we put them onto our by name list where they're prioritized based on their score and other prioritizing characteristics that Johnson County has identified. Like Rita mentioned earlier, chronic homelessness is one of the prioritizing characteristics. And then finally, we have a referral process to help connect people experiencing homelessness with the resources that are available. And the reason that we do this is there are limited resources through these HUD dollars for rapid rehousing programs, permanent supportive housing programs, and other housing support. So we want to make sure that we are targeting the resources we do have for our most vulnerable population. So getting the word out, we want to make sure that those who are experiencing housing crisis are able to connect with an organization. So it's really important when you are working with someone who is either experiencing homelessness or is on the brink of a housing crisis. The first thing that we do is, get them connected to an agency that can talk to them a little bit about what's going on and look at diversion. We never jump straight to a VAT or an assessment. That is not an instant fix. It's not going to get someone housed overnight. It's not going to get someone to shelter overnight. Our first goal is always to make sure that the individual or the household is safe. And so we have different agencies, and so they have different triage screenings and diversion tools to use. Is there somewhere that you can stay? Are there any resources available in the community? if we, can help with this bill or this situation, will that, allow you to stay housed for a certain amount of time and avoid homelessness? If someone is already experiencing homelessness, literal homelessness, so on the street, in the car, abandoned building, under a bridge, and that cannot be avoided, we want to get them connected, try to get them connected to an emergency shelter, or a motel voucher. We've been fortunate to have those more often with a lot of the COVID funds than we historically have. But Church of the Resurrection's also been a wonderful partner with that. If there is no shelter space, either in our county or in another county, which is often, it can be an issue as well. We want to make sure that we're just trying to be creative in our solution, safety planning. What do they need to be safe? If they're not interested in shelter or there isn't a space, what do they need? Do we have any warm items or anything like that? And then we do want to get them, if they're experiencing literal homelessness and they are interested in, getting onto our county's by name list for housing resources, we do want to get them a desk vat. And so we want to make sure we're connecting with the correct agency, but that's really just important to remember that is never our first step. It's not our go-to. It's not an instant fix. That's more of our looking at the long-term stabilization of a person, because even if someone gets referred from a list, we have to find a landlord, it's always a process. So safety is our number one concern, and helping individuals and families find somewhere to go where they can stay safely and then hopefully we can get that VAT and the housing referrals out for them. Here in Johnson County, we have some different sites or agencies that we partner with to administer the VAT. So with COVID-19, most agencies are conducting the VATs virtually or over the phone, I guess. It kind of depends on the agency. And so here's a list of contact information. And so you'll have it. There's flyers too, Rita had said. So those are really helpful to hand out. But Salvation Army here in Olathe, Catholic Charities, Johnson County Mental Health and Safe Home. We also partner with some other agencies or people who can help assist with VATs. So through Johnson County Mental Health and Restart, we have street outreach, trained people who are VAT trained folks. We're also, Project 1020 has someone who can help complete the VATs there. So we do have, just to keep the validity and reliability of the tool itself, the way it's administered, everyone has to be doing it as close to the same as possible. So it is a small group of people who are VAT trainers. But we do want to have like kind of our whole service area covered. And sometimes the phone calls, I think, have been really helpful in reducing barriers. We know transportation is a big barrier in Johnson County. So, and all the difficulties of COVID, I think we've also seen people who've been able to access the system in a different way, which has been beautiful too. And then after someone completes this VAT, so if they are experiencing literal homelessness and they're interested in, getting onto the by name or housing prioritization list, then we have a group who meets biweekly. So every other week, there's 8 organizations who participate. So these are organizations both who are completing the VAT, or people who are the VAT screeners, as well as organizations who are providing the housing resources. So transitional housing, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. So every other week, these individuals, these 8 organizations get together to basically discuss, referrals from the by name list. If someone's having trouble connecting with a referral, hopefully the person who completed the VAT is there, or another agency has connected with this person and knows how to reach them. But to receive referrals and talk through referrals to help make sure that we are catching everyone who is on our list and hopefully helping them get permanent housing.
Danny, there was one question about the VAT. Do all agencies have Spanish speakers available to administer the VAT?
Rita, I would say no. I don't think all agencies do. A lot of agencies do have access to interpreters. Safe Home does, I see there. I think some agencies use interpreters. I've been able to do the VAT at Catholic Charities in Spanish, but I'm leaving Catholic Charities, so I won't be able to do it anymore. And So that is something we do have access. If someone is a Spanish speaking person, we can get them connected with someone who speaks Spanish to complete the VAT. So I would just, if that was a case, I'd have them just reach out to, because we don't want to send someone somewhere where they're not going to be able to access it in that moment. So if that is a concern, if someone's going to need an interpreter and you happen to be working with them, you can reach out to Rita or Mina, and we can schedule more of an appointment, like, because we do VATs by appointment. It's not typically walk in and get a VAT done. It's an appointment thing because, again, it's not an instant fix. So we can definitely get them connected somewhere where we can have access to Spanish. Yep. So I know Salvation Army, yeah, also uses an interpreter too. So.
And I will send out the updated flyer with the coordinated entry information after this meeting. Any other questions about coordinated entry?
I'd just say it's been absolutely beautiful to see this process grow over the last 5.5 years. When I started, each agency was doing its own thing. We kind of sometimes knew each other, but the way that we've come together as a community, we've really, I don't know what the numbers are. It'd be super interesting to see how many people have been connected with, permanent housing and over this 5 years that we've been implementing this system. But, bringing all the agencies together and the case managers together on a biweekly basis. We've had a lot of really hard conversations, but there's been a lot of growth and beauty and really able to, serve the community and hopefully meet the needs of those experiencing housing crisis to help find permanent housing. So I just kudos to everybody throughout the COC who's been a part of this because it has been a process and but it's beautiful to see where we are and I'm excited to see where you guys go.
Yeah, it seems like almost every time we meet, somebody has somebody who's gotten housed since then and offering up vouchers and things each time. So it's not fast by any means. Going through coordinated entry is, as Danny mentioned, it's not an immediate fix. So we do still want to have those shelter numbers on hand and the short-term solutions available. But it is a path that places people with really high needs and high barriers into a permanent housing situation. And shout out to Danny for how many years have you been at Catholic Charities? We will miss you.
Thank you. 5.5. So yes, it's been fun to be a part of all of this. So thank you all for everything.
Yeah, so Danny and Mina and a few other people around the table have been there since we began the coordinated entry process.